Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's episode of Trending, brought to you by Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. Good morning, Richard. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be back this week. First one of the week.
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. It certainly is. It's good to be here as well, mate. It's about 25 degrees outside, so I prefer to be there. But right now, let's get into it. Where are we going this morning? We're heading up to Manchester, I believe, to a story we've not covered for a few weeks, but there's more coming out.
Yeah, we are. It was 25 degrees out there till they blocked the sun now, obviously.
Very true.
Men,
Very true.
yeah, it's on its way. Men who groomed and sexually exploited girls in Greater Manchester sentenced. Now, I think this is really important, obviously, for the fact of what it is, but we automatically, and most of the mainstream media would highlight that as a Pakistani Muslim issue, especially in that part of the world. I mean, I was around with Maggie Oliver filming at the time when it was most in the headlines, and she had issues with, let's say, it being blamed on the Muslim faith, as opposed to being more sort of understanding of the Pakistani way of life, or even then, just a small group of people within a small group of people within a small group of people. It was being used. So this is two men have been sentenced at Liverpool Crown Court for grooming and sexually exploiting girls in Greater Manchester. So these are all, they look as if they're all British, English, European, certainly not Muslim. Although that's a faith, so I'm being a bit kind of, a bit ignorant there, I suppose, in my comment. Ashley Derbyshire, 28, was jailed for 15 years. Daniel James Flatters, 34, was jailed for 7 years. Richard Haslam, 36, was jailed for 16 years. Jack Poulton, 32, was jailed for 17 years. Corey Barrett, 24 years. He was 24 and jailed for 12 years. Brandon Harwood, 25, was jailed for 10 years. Ross Corley, 30, was jailed for 2 years and 4 months. Elliot, 26, who was 26, was jailed for 2 years. And James Fitzgerald, 36, was jailed for 5 years and 6 months. And Harvey Aspend, 25, was sentenced to 1 year and 3 months in prison, suspended for 2 years. This is a large group of men. Yeah, I mean, it is a controlled system of grooming that I would hazard to guess locks in with the same grooming gangs that have been the Pakistani grooming gangs that have been blamed on the Muslim faith. So I think it's a really important story that and this is from the CPS website, that this is being picked up. Now, the comments underneath it are like, what were you doing about the Pakistani grooming gangs? Automatically, it's going to flare up that divide anyway. But I think it's important that it's reported on that this isn't just a Muslim thing. And I think that's going to get a lot of people's division. But how can you not report on it and get slack, and then report on it and get flack even as well? So Gil Petrov, senior Crown prosecutor for CPS Northwest, said the way the men groomed and coerced the young girls from their community for their own sexual gratification was manipulative and appalling. They exploited the girls with no concern for them or the impact the abuse from a young age would have on their lives. Sexual abuse can cause lifelong physical and emotional trauma. As their abusers begin their sentences, I hope the women can now begin to move forward, knowing that because of their evidence and support, the men have been brought to justice. I just thought that was a really important story to show that this is, this happens in every sector of society and across the board, and in an organised fashion as well. So that was an important one to put out. And it was, it was Richie Allen who put it out yesterday, and he got a lot of flack for it as well, for just putting that out and not mentioning the other ones. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't, really, with this one.
Yeah, you are. I understand the argument that people will make is that this is being reported very widespread. It's in the mainstream media. It's allowed to be spoken about. You'll be able to tweet and say whatever you want about these men that have been jailed, whereas when it was the other way around, it was still very hush-hush. It was covered up. You're still not allowed really to talk about it in a public domain and not expect some kind of backlash. So that's where I guess the argument is from people, that there's two tiers of judiciary, two tiers of policing, and two tiers of media coverage on these issues. But the point is, what these guys have done and what people like that do, and they exist in every demographic of society, probably in every country, and every culture and every faith and every ideology. They're disgusting. They're animals. They're the worst of humanity. And that, that's something that needs to be pointed out. It needs to be highlighted. If you want genuine equality, you want a genuine level playing field, you have to treat everybody the same. You have to expose everybody, and you have to prosecute everybody in exactly the same way. So the fact that these guys have been found guilty for what they've done, the fact that they're going to spend a fair few years in jail. They can't hurt anybody else, hopefully, when they're in there, and maybe they might come out with a slightly different view of the world, which will stop them hurting anybody else in future. That's only a good thing. Obviously, it was talked about, wasn't it, Rich? I think we covered it previously, about the grooming gang of up in Glasgow of Scottish men that were jailed. I think it was last year, and there was lots of calls for people to call out them in the same way they were calling out the Asian Pakistani grooming gangs. And it's like, yeah, we'll call them out in exactly the same way. If they're doing the same thing and they're ruining young girls' lives in exactly the same way, then of course they're being called out. The point is they've been prosecuted. The argument that people use towards the grooming gangs in towns like Rochdale, Telford and so on is that they weren't prosecuted until it was far too late, and so many young girls had their lives destroyed through, one, incompetence, and two, corruption in the levels of the police and the local councils and local authorities, whether that's caused by a fear of being called racist or whether that's being complicit and involved in it at some level, who knows, probably a little bit of both. But either way, a lot of young girls in this country are having their lives destroyed by these gangs. Whoever they are, it is really actually irrelevant when it breaks it down. They're just evil, evil people who need to be brought to account, whatever their skin colour, whatever their religion, and whatever their ideology. They're clearly sick guys who belong in cells and shouldn't see the light of day, in my opinion, ever again. But yeah
absolutely. I think the issue there was really bolted onto it is attaching it to a religion, and I think that's where the issue became an issue. Like, these guys they look British. I'm just saying that they do, European. That's not attached to a religion, whereas the other one was attached automatically to a religion, therefore blaming the religion and everyone who's involved with the religion for the actions of a few. That's where it gets murky, and I can understand why people are annoyed, but people were using it for political and religious, weaponizing the actual situation back then for that. So there's an issue here with ideologies as well. So it's very complex.
There's also an issue with how extremely you take an ideology. So you can apply that to lots of different things. I went to a football match last night. I sat in the stands, watched the game, went home. In the same crowd, there would have been, in the same fan zone I was in, there would have been ultras that would have all gone and had a street fight with opposition fans just before, because they support different teams. So we can both be watching football, we can both enjoy it and support a team, but we take it to completely different levels. And religion is a very similar principle. You can have people that follow Islam that are very much integrated in society and get on with their lives, and they practice their faith, but they don't impose it on you, and they're lovely people. And then you can have people at the extreme Wahhabi end of it that see young white girls as trash and don't have any moral repercussions for what they do to them. And you can apply that logic to every single religion. You can apply that to different cults. You can apply that to so many different things. But like you say, attaching an entire faith with over 1 billion people that follow it to this behavior of a few hundred people, that's where the problem starts. And that's the division, which is so essential to the divide and rule that they put out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, we're going to move on to an interesting story. I saw this morning and thought, here we go. So, smart meters, right? For anyone around the world that doesn't know what a smart meter is, I'm sure you have a comparable version in your country. It's essentially it's a device that you put in your home that tells you how much you're spending in terms of gas and electric in real time, and therefore you know how much a certain appliance might be draining your electricity, how much certain hours of the day you might be using more or less, whatever. But they basically are spreading quite a lot of radiation. So the old-fashioned gas and electric meters usually were on the outside of your house. They weren't inside the house. And they used long-wave frequency technology, kind of like analog radio and analog television, where the waves were incredibly long and there was long gaps between them. So the level of radiation in what you would say a kind of standard state, just while you sat around, was incredibly low. Whereas this new technology is using shortwave technology. To apply that to people who know a bit about this, compare it to your old-fashioned radio signals compared to your modern microwave mobile phone signals. They're very close together, so therefore there's a constant base level of radiation significantly higher than there was previously. Now, lots of people have opposed having smart meters in their houses. I don't have one in my house, for example. I remember when I bought my house, it was one of the questions I asked on the survey, and we wouldn't have bought it had there been one. And there's been a number of times that I've been hassled, whether it be through text message from my energy provider, whether it be people knocking at the door, whatever, to have a smart meter fitted. And I've always told them the second word's always been off. And I have no interest in doing it. And lots of people across the country have had the same situation. There's people that have houses that they purchased that already had smart meters that have had a nightmare either getting them removed or having them switched into what they call dumb mode, which is where they're kind of turned off and the radiation is not at the same level, or although that's what they tell you, whether it is, you'd have to measure that yourself. But anyway, they can't be having people refusing anymore. So right now, they just decided they're just not going to give you a choice. So on the 30th of June, they're going to switch off the technology that allows the old-fashioned meters to work. So in a house like mine, for example, post 30th June, I either won't be able to have any gas or electricity at all, or it will be turned on all the time, which I think I'd notice my bill changing slightly. So hundreds of thousands of people are at risk of losing hot water or heating when their old type of electricity meter goes out of action. Energy companies have said it will be very, very difficult to replace all radio teleswitching technology meters with smart meters before the old technology is switched off on the 30th of June. So this story is about the fact they need to delay this switch because they're not fitting smart meters quick enough to ensure that everybody isn't going to be affected when this technology is turned off. There's no mention of the people like me that don't want a smart meter in their house. No mention of that. Don't care about you, mate. Not interested whatsoever. Campaigners estimate more than 300,000 homes could lose heating or have it stuck on constantly in what energy regulator Ofcom has called an urgent consumer welfare issue. The government said said the industry had to work urgently to continue replacing the meters. Since the 1980s, RTS meters, so that the ones that we have currently, have used long-wave radio frequency to switch between peak and off-peak rates, because obviously, at peak times when lots of people are at home cooking meals, having baths, having the heating on in the evenings, they put the prices up, which is really nice of them, off-peak during the day. So that technology communicates to allow that to happen. When essentially now they want to put these smart meters in your house, and if you don't want one, you either have no heating at all or it's on all the time, which no one can afford and no one wants to live. So how dare you refuse, Rich? Because they'll just do it anyway.
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's your house. You decide where you want it. That's
the dream they sell you.
That's the point, isn't it? That's the entire point. Next, they'll be coming in there to tell you which diagonal and direction to point your telly in and where you're going to have your sofa. This is the point. It's that it's yours and they're encroaching on it. Yep. It's like saying you wouldn't have them come in and tell you what tyres to put on your car. You wouldn't have them come in and tell you what top you're going to wear. Where does it stop? This is my house. I'll decide what I have in here and I'll pay the bill accordingly. So we don't have a smart meter. I have no intention of ever getting one. We don't turn the heating on, so it won't be on. People en masse have just got to say, I'm not going to pay it. Can't pay it, won't pay it.
Well, the thing is smart meters, there's lots of people talking about, they actually cost more money. They cost you more money. They don't save you money, which was the argument. They cost more.
Yeah. Well, they save you, the argument was you'll know what you're spending. Well, that doesn't make any difference. You know you're spending more then, and you just watch it. It's, again, you can't bully people into these things en masse. So again, it's going to have to be a case of, take it with a pinch of salt. They'll probably have to push it back because that's just not going to happen. And also the infrastructure isn't there. The technology isn't there. How are they going to constantly flood the country with heating, electricity? They've just had a blackout in Europe. Yep. Like, come on. It's nonsense. So I would maybe even look it to that point where they might want to overload the system on purpose to create a blackout. I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, but what greater result can you have to have a massive blackout in the country if you've gone, well, everyone didn't switch over to smart meters. We need to get everyone sorted on this smart grid because we can't consistently flood your house with electricity and heating to cause your bills to go up if we don't have that technology in your house. It's just, so there's many ways they can play it, but there's always a scam underneath it, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I agree. I got an interesting thing to ask you, get your take on. So do you remember a few years ago when they started to put the calorie amount on menus of what each dish on a menu contained, right? I remember at the time thinking all that's going to do is mean people are just not going to want to eat anything because you're going to be looking at that going, oh my God, every time you go out for a meal. And lots of people do. And I wonder if smart meters is a similar principle because with an old-fashioned meter, because you didn't have a monetary amount of what you were spending every single day, for most people, if you were cold, you'd stick the heating on. And that was that. In the winter, if you were cold, you'd turn the heating up until you warmed up, or you'd set your heating to come on at a certain time when you know you're going to be up in the mornings, or when you started to feel that temperature change and so on. Whereas, when your bill came, you then dealt with it. It was very much, I'm cold, I'm turning the heating on, you were living in the moment. Whereas now, I wonder if every time that you do that, and you turn the heating on, let's say, and you look and go, fuck, I've just been a bit cold and that's cost me 50p. I'm doing that tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get a coat on, or I'm just going to put up with it. And you'll probably find people actually won't use their appliances or won't use their heating in the same way, because they actually see the instant monetary repercussions of doing so. So you're probably going to have people sat there cold because they think, I can't afford that, rather than just living in the moment and being like, I'm cold, I'm putting the heating on. And it's constantly having that mindset of almost fear and anxiety of, how much am I spending? How much is that going to cost me? Oh no, we can't put the hot tub on. Oh no, we can't put the fridge on. No, we can't get another oh no, we can't do that. Rather than just living life. It's constant fear. I wonder if that's part of it as well. I know the bigger reason is they want radiation in the home and they obviously want to increase your prices, but I wonder if that little sort of mindset that you're constantly looking at the bottom line, which most people are these days, if that's kind of another way of trying to get that into your head.
I would absolutely agree. That's just the kind of thing where where you're always being watched. This big brother's always watching you. You're watching everything you do. You've been watched, and that has a psychological effect on everybody. What's the prison they have with the basically the warden's thing right in the middle where they can see all around the jail? It has an effect on the people because they know they're being watched or could be watched all the time. Yeah, absolutely. It's this, you're being watched, behave yourself, social credit system, slave race. And it's this mentality that I've got to watch what I'm doing or I'm being watched and monitored all the time. Huge part of it. And I would say probably the most important part of it is that if you're going to change behaviors, you need to change people's understanding of how their behavior affects their outcomes.
Yeah. It's also, just a final comment on it, it's forcing you to interact with technology when you might not want to. So for me, my energy meter is on the outside of my house. I look at it, I think every 2 or 3 months, because I don't have a fixed tariff. Because that's another way they started to try and get you before they actually brought this particular rule in or law in where they're forcing you to have one, is they just made it really difficult for you. So they wouldn't, I don't know if you're in the same place, Rich, because you haven't got one either. They won't give you a fixed price tariff. They won't do that. They basically make you send in a meter reading every month or 6 weeks or whatever, and then they'll charge you for your usage. Whereas most people with a smart meter, they can do a fixed price and then you pay the balance at the end of the year. But for me, they wouldn't do that. So I go and check mine, every couple of months probably. Don't even think about it apart from that. It's just sat on the outside of the house. Whereas when you have one in your house, which the smart meters are, when it's on the kitchen side and you can see the money totting up, you can see the usage. Not only is the radiation a thing, it's also getting you interacting with technology. You'd be looking at it, you'd be conscious of it. And it's another form of smart technology inside your house, which, do you think it's not going to be listening to you? Of course it is. So for those people that don't have, we'd be in that category. For those people that don't have, your home hubs, your Alexas, your Amazon Echoes and those things in your house that you're talking to and interacting with on like they're human beings when they're technology. For those people that don't want to do that are not giving their data and information and all of that, they're not giving that to them voluntarily. This is a way of forcing you to do it, or trying to force you to do it anyway. So anyone watching, this is an interesting thing to discuss. Anyone watching that is in the same position as me and Rich here, that you don't have a smart meter in your house, you don't want one, you have no intention of getting one, then we've got 2 months now before this rule, this law, whatever you want to call it, comes into power, and we all might have no heating or have too much heating. Let's hear from as many of you as possible. We want to hear from you, and we want to try and, anything we can do to try and put together some kind of pushback against this, let's do it. So if you fire in an email to editor@iconic.com, that'll come straight to me, and we'll go through them. And if we can, if we can get enough of us together, we'll try and put together a bit of a movement to push back against this in some way, shape or form, because I do believe there's enough of us. There's 430,000 according to this story that don't have smart meters currently. Half of them, let's say, don't want one and stand up and refuse to have one. Then I think we can make some waves. So please head in, put in your emails, editor@iconic.com, and we'll try and put something together. Rich, right, we're going to talk to P-Diddy now, I believe, which is a hell of a segue. But his trial starts, I believe. Is it tomorrow? Is it today?
I'm not quite sure when the trial starts, but he's
I think it's
basically.
this week. Yeah,
Is it this week?
I think
Yeah.
so.
He's
Yeah,
so Sean Diddy Combs' lawyer claims he's might not be capable of might not have been made mentally capable of crimes due to drug use. I mean, what an excuse! So Sean Diddy Combs' legal team has claimed that the disgraced music mogul might not have been mentally capable of committing crimes due to basically being off his face. Combs, 25, faces a minimum of 15 years in prison after being charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and fraud. He's locked up without bail, and his trial is set to begin May the 5th.
yeah. Monday then. Next
So
Monday.
Monday, yeah. So basically, yeah, they're trying to get him off on the fact that he's not capable, he's incompetent to not now go into trial, but at the time he was not capable of controlling his actions. But that's absolutely ludicrous. So let's look at this because this isn't a new thing. He didn't do it a couple of times. This was going on for decades. John Legend's manager pens New York Times op-ed on predatory, toxic music industry amid Diddy allegations. And she says we can clean it up. This goes back 27 years. Emmy-winning producer Ty Skilorius describes a Sean Combs yacht party she attended 27 years ago and says, we have an opportunity to turn the page on an archaic, sometimes predatory model of doing business. So you had Diddy and his gang doing the entertainment business, trafficking there. And you also had, I think it's a guy called Mike Jeffries has been accused of doing this as well with male models. And he's Abercrombie and Fitch, I believe. And he can't stand trial because I think he's in the later stages of dementia. We're seeing this creep through, this kind of not capable of, being responsible for your own actions. Yeah. This is themes coming through here. And then obviously Epstein was doing it in the political spheres. They're all doing it on the island of St. Bart's. I've wrote an article about that. It's coming out this week. That's a very specific place that they're not looking at. And that's probably because Abramovich owns a lot of the properties and a lot of the people there. So that's worth looking into. But this, on the side of that, that's 27 years ago. How can you say you were off your head on drugs for 27 plus years and you're not responsible for anything that you've done? I know they're talking about specific crimes. This has been going on for decades and way before Diddy, and it's much bigger than Diddy, obviously, and Epstein. But, we're seeing this thing come through where people aren't emotionally, mentally, physically capable of taking responsibility for their actions. I've seen this come through now quite a few times. With this, they're too old, they're too senile, they're not aware of what they're doing. Harvey Weinstein tried to do it and make himself look like an old man suddenly overnight on a Zimmer frame. It's a very, very interesting play that they're bringing out at the moment. But 27 years ago, that was.
Yeah. This reminds me of the Prince Andrew, I can't sweat, so it couldn't have been me story, doesn't it? It's just, I don't care how old you are. I don't care how senile you are. If you've committed certain crimes and you've committed certain actions and you've ruined the lives of so many people, I don't care. You should face justice. And this is complete BS. This is this guy trying to get out of it, isn't it? He's clearly the gateway to something. He's clearly the gateway to something, like all these people, like Epstein was, like Jimmy Savile was, like all these figures. They're the gateway to something significantly bigger. So there's no way they're going to let Diddy fall. No way they're going to let him fall, in the sense of, if he had nothing left to lose, he might start naming some names. And they're not going to allow that to happen. That's why they get rid of these people. That's why they disappear them. It's what they did with your Robert Maxwell. It's what they did potentially with Epstein, or whether they got him out and stuck him somewhere else. I don't know. I know Ghislaine Maxwell, it's all gone very quiet on her, isn't it, since her arrest, but she's obviously not going to start naming names either. They get rid of these people. So for him, if he is genuinely in a position where he has nothing left to lose and he's going to face trial and he's potentially going to start, opening the doorway to who he was working for and on behalf of and who was above him, then they'll just get rid of him. So maybe this could be a prelude for that. If you're putting out the fact that this guy was off his face for however many years on drugs, then all of a sudden people that are addicted to drugs often end up dead, don't they? People that, have, whether it be overdoses, whether it be, you struggle with that in prison, but whether it be things like that, whether it be the side effects of taking drugs for so many years, there's a prelude to potentially getting rid of him, I think. And also, they also want to create, a situation where you maybe even feel sorry for him. He was so off his face, he didn't know what he was doing. which is just,
For
I feel sorry
27,
for his
for
victims.
27 years.
Yeah, for 27 years.
That's the reason why I bring that up, is that it's 27 years. If you're talking about one or two incidences, still horrific, but you can understand the context. Okay, they maybe have been off his face a couple of times. He had a drug problem, even though it's no excuse. I'm not saying that. But you can't go back over a 27-year period of consistent behaviour and say every single time.
Yeah.
And it was organised trafficking.
Yeah.
It's in the Caribbean islands, the same 50-minute flight from Epstein Island, St. Bart's is. This is where it's all happening. St. Bart's Island is something that I believe, and I said that in the article coming out this week on iconic.com, that you really need to start looking into this place, because Abramovich owns a lot of not just property there, but people there. He's very close to Putin. There's something else going on here, and people aren't speaking about it on that island. And that island is crucial to understanding, really, as you said, there's something much deeper, nod, wink, wink, darker going on here than just sex trafficking. What were they using the, I don't know, maybe the sperm and the eggs of these people for? I believe there's much more going on here. And as you say, they're not going to let someone like P-Diddy spill the beans on that.
No, they're not. I agree completely, mate. They always try and make you believe that this is a few sick weirdos that have certain fetishes, that have certain power-hungry, crazy type, abusers of their influence and power. They always try and isolate them with that mindset. They don't want you to believe, actually, yes, they are all of those things. However, there's method and planning and careful consideration behind what they do, and there's reasons for why they do it. It's not as simple as that. Because otherwise, you could have this argument that if you are Diddy, let's say, you've got everything. You've got money, you've got fame, you could have any girl you want, you could have you've got as much money to buy whatever you want. You've got the life of Riley. Why would you risk it all to do what he was doing? And you could apply that argument to so many people. Why would you do it? If there wasn't a reason that you were doing it, if there wasn't method behind it, if there was not something you were doing it for. And clearly these people were working to some kind of agenda, some of which you've alluded to there, Rich, and others have written about over the years. And, the fact that these kind of things infest the establishment, as you pointed out, whether that's in politics, whether that's in entertainment, whatever it is, it's clear that this is happening for a reason. And until you start looking at why and looking into things like St. Bart's, Epstein Island, what was under Epstein Island, Zorro Ranch, and those other areas and places, then you're not going to understand. You're just going to keep looking, going, oh, there's another weirdo. Oh, there's another entertainment guy who abused his power. Yes, they do. And yes, there is people in that circle who are just wrong-uns and are just people who have weird, sick fetishes and think it's okay to abuse power. But the ones at the very top, the ones that you see and hear as the real orchestrators of these things, your Savills, your Epsteins, your Ghislaine Maxwells, your P-Diddies, they know what they're doing, and they're doing it on behalf of something much bigger. And until we start looking at what those bigger things are, you're always still going to be poking around in the symptoms. So I look forward to reading your article, Richard, and that will be on iconic.com. What, today, tomorrow?
I'm not sure when it's going out. I wrote it over last night, but it's the research from this week's video, and man, it goes in deep.
I mean, I'll put it out the second this show finishes.
Okay, well, it goes into Elon Musk. It goes into his 13th child he had conceived on St. Bart's, called Romulus. Yeah. We have a dire wolf that's been brought back to life, de-extinct by George Church, and they called them Romulus and Remus, which were the mythological founders of Rome. And also, George Church was funded by Jeffrey Epstein. So it's all connected.
It is all connected. Right, we'll put if you're watching Trending through the Trending newsletter email, we'll put the article below the video so you can see that. If not, if you're watching it online, head over to iconic.com and it'll be one of the top stories on the website. Right, final story today, Richard, comes from this woman's name, Dame Meg Hillier, right, who is a lady who's working on behalf of the Treasury looking into cash acceptance across different regions in the UK. So this is the story. A cashless society risks cutting off vulnerable victims. Everyone's a victim, aren't they? They love trying to make everybody sound like they are victims because it makes you sound weak. Mm-hmm. What it means is it risks cutting off, well, it risks lots of things, but what this story really should say is it risks cutting off people who are not as savvy on technology. That's what it should say. So people who grew up with technology not being as prominent in your lives. So the elderly, who yet would be considered vulnerable when it comes to this, but they're not victims. Stop trying to make everybody sound like they're a victim. It's the design. It's to make you feel tiny. Anyway, I visited Darlington Market in County Durham earlier this year as part of the Treasury Committee's inquiry into cash acceptance. Two things struck me. Well, should have ducked. Firstly, market traders are tougher negotiators than most. Brilliant. And secondly, there are many people for whom being able to buy essentials with cash is critical. Now, there's so many reasons that cash is important. So many. You can break it down to really basic levels, or you can break it down to slightly more conspiratorial levels when you get the bigger picture. A simple one is that when you buy something, when you pay in cash, what you give the person you're purchasing it off is worth what you've given them, and they receive what it's worth. The £10 you give them for an item, they receive £10. When you pay on card, the card processing company will take 2.5%, let's say, as an average, maybe 3%. So when you give them £10, they lose 30 pence of that. So immediately then, it's worth less. So after a few transactions, your £10, if everyone pays on card, they pay on card, then they do, then they do, then they do. After a few transactions, that £10's gone. It's not worth anything because it's gone into the hands of the card processing companies and it's gone into the system, never to be seen again. Whereas if you pay with £10, after 100 transactions, if every single person that received that £10 pays with cash, that £10 is still worth £10. Still in circulation, it's still real, actual money. The other thing is, when it comes to people like market stalls, the people that are receiving the money, it also gives them an opportunity to pay for things cash in hand, whether that be staff, whether that be, them being able to live, which is how a lot of tradies used to survive. A proportion of their money they would take cash in hand, a proportion of them they would declare and pay tax on. It's how a lot of people survived. Obviously, they've really cracked down on that. Obviously, how dare you have any money to survive? We want 20%, 30%, 40% of it. And then we want the rest when you die. Oh, and we want your council tax and your car tax. And if you buy an asset and you sell it for more, we want your capital gains tax as well. How dare you have anything? That's one aspect of it. The other is if cash goes and everything is digital, they have complete control over everything. In the same way we spoke about earlier with smart meters, where they have complete control, everything is online, everything is digital. If everything is digital when it comes to your money, they can just turn that off. They can not let you spend money in certain places. They can not let you spend because, they just want to cut off your bank accounts. And we've seen that in recent months where there's been technical issues where people haven't been able to use their cards, people haven't been able to use online banking, and they've had no access to their money, which has caused, I think, if I remember rightly, Rich, we covered this story. Didn't a couple with a family lose out on a house purchase because the banks went down and they couldn't get access to any money to pay their mortgage deposit or something, and they actually had a whole house sale fall through or something, and they ended up living in an Airbnb or a B&B for a couple of weeks. These things this is massive, and they put it down to technical glitches. Well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say it was. But when it comes to them having complete control over your money digitally, that's incredibly dangerous. So that's one level of it. And obviously that's another level of it. What this story goes into is how this will affect the elderly and people who don't want to use technology on a daily basis. Maybe people that don't have smartphones, don't want to use things like Apple Pay or Google Pay. They might have a good old-fashioned debit card where they draw some money out on a Friday, and that cash is what they use to spend to live their lives for that week. Whether it be, elderly, vulnerable people that might take their pension out and they want to spend their money in cash. If you go to a cashless society, that all of a sudden goes, and that you've got people then reliant on technology who really maybe don't want to use it or are struggling to use it. And I've noticed this myself, I'm sure you have as well, Rich. When you go to places, there's not a lot of tolerance from people towards elderly people who maybe might be that little bit slower when it comes to using technology. And there's literally no compassion, I don't think, in a lot of people. So I think this could lead to a lot of elderly people feeling, one, disengaged, disenfranchised, disconnected from society, which if you want to take it to an even bigger agenda, which is that they obviously want to get rid of elderly people. They've attacked them in so many different ways in the last 5 years, whether it be freezing them to death, whether it be winter fuel payments, whether it be the COVID vaccine, whether it be lockdown policies, whether it be letting elderly people in homes that probably would have lived for a good deal longer die, euthanizing them. There's so many ways they've attacked the elderly, which then brings in the further deeper agenda, which was spoken about by Dr. Richard Day in 1967, about the demise pill. About when you get to a certain age, you would take the demise pill and essentially you would euthanize yourself and your life would be cut off. Now, that might sound crazy to people watching, but this has been written about, this has been spoken about. You've got mainstream figures like Gates and other lunatics talking about depopulation, talking about how there's too many people on the planets. There's been a number of demonizations of the elderly in recent years, whether it be COVID, whether it be the Brexit vote, whatever it might be. There's been demonizations and pitting of the elderly against the young. It's very clear to see that the elderly are being marginalized. Technology is obviously doing that massively as well, to the point that maybe a lot of older people will actually start to feel less part of society, less engaged with it, less connected to it. And the demise pill all of a sudden then might sound more promising. And the system get rid of what they call useless eaters. They save all that money on pensions, and they have and you never reach a point where you get to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor, which so many older people don't anymore because they never get to the point they have enough money to be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. You've got people working till they drop. There's so many areas you can go into with this one, Rich, but it's very clear to see that the cashless society, which was a conspiracy theory a decade ago, is coming to us very, very quickly, to the point they're now actually doing inquiries into the effects of it. But the fact this story's out there is a good one, I think, because it gets people talking about the issue, I hope.
I think it's an important one. I think it's a really important one, because actually what it does underneath it highlights the power that we have in our generation, or I'm a little bit older than you, quite a bit older than you, and the older generation, because because the fact is that they are, well, once they run the world without without technology, but also they're the ones that can have a valid reason not to use it. It can't come in now because the elderly people can't use it.
Yep.
There's a real valid reason, and everything that these guys do, these cult does, has to have public acceptance. None of them can get anything done unless the vast majority of people allow it to happen or let it happen. So therefore, they had to sell it to you. Right now, they can't really sell it to you. Our generation, or my generation, were the ones that were born without the internet and grew up with the internet as sort of late teens, early 20s. So that's a really important crossover and transition period there. We remember what the world was like. You can survive without the internet.
Yep.
I think we even spoke last week about an article said you wouldn't have the internet for 3 days. What would you do? And
Bring it on.
Be fine. Be absolutely fine. But it's what their people are still at their stage now. They haven't transferred straight over to this transhumanist technocracy society, socially or psychologically, because there's still us still around. We're still here, and we have an important thing to do and say, look, we don't need all of this stuff. This is all about tracking everything you do, controlling every single element of everything you do, and you being aware that it's controlling you, and then accepting that as the Overton window switches and shifts up as being normal. It's not normal to have to explain every single thing you do as an adult to anyone. That's not your place to do. You don't have to excuse your behavior. You don't have to tell everyone everything about what you're doing, although social media pretends to make you think you do. You don't have to explain yourself as an adult. That's what you have to do as an infant and a child. When someone else is taking care of you financially and parents are bringing you up, you do, because you have a system built around you that you kind of have to work within. As an adult, you shouldn't have to do that. So what they're going to try and do is basically make you as grown-up children. Do as you're told. But even worse is you're going to pay for it. You're going to financially fund your own fascist, communist, technocracy system, whatever you want to call it. That's the evil of it all. And gradually, as it builds, this is coming in, but they can't quite do it now. So the elderly and my generation, middle-aged generation, have a really important thing to make sure that this information is out there for people to realize that this isn't really coming for me. This isn't really coming for the elderly. This is coming for our kids and our grandkids and our grandkids, and then whatever transhumanist being they create in the future. That doesn't have to happen, but we have a really important role in stopping this happening, and that's through the widespread information and understanding what the aim and the agenda is of this. And it's all about total and utter control of everything you do at all times.
It is. I completely agree. And I think you made a really good point there, mate, to do with the passage of time and experience. So I think my generation was probably the last one. Like, I was 16 when the first iPhone came out. So I was in high school. So I went through most of my formative years in school without smartphones. And I think I only got a phone when I was 16 because I went to school in a different town. I had to get the bus. And then when I got a moped, I remember mum being like, you're definitely having a phone because you might fall off. So I think I was about 16. But again, they were really old-fashioned phones that you could literally just phone and text and play Snake.
Yep.
There was no smartphones, really. They weren't as widespread because if you remember when the iPhones came out, they were so expensive that it was like a status to have one. Whereas now, everyone's got one. Everyone's got one. And I think what's important is that passage of experience, because to use this analogy, if you were born into a lunatic asylum and you had never experienced the outside world, that would be your normal. So if somebody from the outside came in and said, outside of these four walls, the world ain't like this, it's nothing like this, they'd be the odd one. They'd be the one that you'd be looked at going, well, this is all I've ever known. So the accounts of that person who's come from outside those four walls would be so important to giving you a balanced view of life, because you'd have somebody else's opinion that's not only experienced what you have. To then apply that to kids today that are growing up in a world that is so full of technology, where you've got kids as young as 2 that can use iPads before they can walk and talk, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you've even got games on iPads for dogs and pets to play now. It's just the interaction with technology from such a young age is so rife that when these kids get to their formative years, their really important young teenage years, that's all they're going to have ever known. And if at the older age, there isn't anybody that can go, hang on guys, before, just a decade or 2 ago, it wasn't anything like this. You know, the internet was invented in 1988, supposedly. That is 36 years ago. That's nothing. That's no time. 37 years ago, sorry. That's no time at all. The entire world has changed, more probably in known history than ever before in such a short window. That's one generation, basically. I mean, that's your lifetime, Rich. So I think it's so important that we keep telling and explaining that this isn't how things have always been. And yes, there's some fantastic things about technology. You're 200 miles away and we're having a chat to people who are thousands of miles away around the world. That's amazing. Let's use the benefits of it. But it's not the be-all and end-all of life. The best things in life will always happen offline. You're never going to experience holding your child for the first time, your wedding day, you know, being out in nature in the sunshine. You're never going to have those things with technology, those beautiful moments that are pure. And it's so important that we keep talking about this so that younger generations don't fall into the trap that online is all that matters. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's a vehicle to be used to benefit your life, and if it becomes something that's negatively impacting it, which for many it is, it's time to reevaluate your relationship with it. And in terms of this news story here, alienating elderly people who have worked their entire lives, who have built their various nations up, who have raised families, who have been there for their grandchildren, who have got that experience of hardship, that experience of life, to be alienating them and disengaging and disconnecting them from society just so that you might be able to pay on a smartphone. It's not the way that we should be going at all, in my opinion. I think it's a very dangerous precedent, but we know why they're doing it for all the reasons that we've just discussed. But I think that is us for this morning, Richard. You're going to be back with Gaz tomorrow, I believe.
Okay, yeah, it'd be nice to see your brother.
Well, you thought it was going to be him this morning, and then I popped up, and I don't know whether you were happy or disappointed. But
no, I don't know how to answer that. That's a difficult question. You've got me in a corner there, because I don't know. I'm wrong either way. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
This is true. Nobody puts Richard in a corner. Yeah. All right, it was a pleasure to talk to you this morning, mate, as always, and I'll speak to you on Friday. Me and Richard will be back with you for the final episode of the week. Until then, have a fantastic day. Enjoy the sunshine. If you're in the UK, 27 degrees today, I believe. So get outside, get some sun on your skin. And remember, the best things happen offline, and to cherish the lovely moments that we have. So we'll see you on Friday. Rich and Gareth will be back tomorrow. Bye.
See you later.